What do you do at the company?
I am a offshore wealth and investment tax structuring expert at Holborn. I specialize in helping high net worth and ultra high net worth families and offices structure their assets and their personal corporate wealth abroad, often to mitigate against unnecessary taxes, helping ensure that the sort of funds and money pass along easily to future generations, helping set up corporate structures abroad in different jurisdictions.
What do you enjoy most about your role?
The absolute freedom and independence that one has when it comes to working at Holborn. You know, very often you hear on the radio and from advisors, wealth managers, about being individual, providing solutions that are bespoke, tailor-made. And I find it quite ironic that just this morning I heard a radio ad about the early bird that gets the worm, but what if you're the worm? I prefer the early bird gets the worm, but it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. Now, having tailor-made and bespoke solutions are all great and well, but if you're still using the same off-the-shelf solutions and pre-packaged products, it doesn't really help. Whereas I find with working here at Holborn, our licenses and our global reach with offices across the globe means that whether I'm dealing with client A or client B or C, if it means giving you that international offshore endowment, I can do that. But if a more bespoke solution that better suits you is actually that corporate structure out of Hong Kong, or a captive sales solution out of Mauritius, a family trust or offshore discretionary pension out of the Isle of Man, I'm able to do all of those too.
What makes our business different?
Okay, if you take the fact that it's that independence, that true independence, you combine that with the fact that we are the second largest independently owned independent wealth advisory globally, it means that we have access to different products, solutions, platforms, providers, which your average retail, even your large institutional company back home, doesn't have access to. Add to the fact that we're offered preferential rates, and you have solutions that you just can't compete with. And that makes us very different from the regular guy down the road. You know, I always say to clients, if you're going to go to Toyota, you're going to get a Toyota. Why not go somewhere where you can get the car you need that serves the purpose that you actually want?
What's the biggest mistake that people make financially?
Working in the high and ultra high net worth sectors that I do, the one thing that I've come across time and time again is that firm belief that, well, my guy is the best. And obviously, why not? You wouldn't be with him or her, with that wealth management or tax advisory company, if you didn't believe they were the best. Very often, there is a lot at stake, future generational wealth. You know, you're not just looking after your own wealth, there's that of your kids, your grandkids, and their kids too. And very often, you'll find that those sorts of individuals, they're with a company because they believe that company's the best. So they don't need a second opinion. They very often don't look at asking for a second opinion or having someone else look at things. And I found also then that very often sometimes it'll be a case where I'm with this particular financial advisory or tax advisory firm because, well, it's a family friend. We've known each other 30, 40 years. They're the best. And a real-world example is I had a client about 4 years back now already that came to me for a European passport. Her daughter was living and working in the UK and in Europe, and she wanted to be able to travel easily without having to need to apply for visas. And she was also going to be getting a divorce very soon and getting a very good settlement from her husband. Having a look at her financial affairs and helping her with that passport, it brought to light many other certain areas, for example, where the advisory firm that she was with, she needed around 400,000 Rand a month to be able to look after her home's needs, the staffing and the electricity, the normal costs associated with that. And the way that all of her wealth was structured was to be able to withdraw that sort of money as income, being taxed at 45%. And there was no need for that. You know, there were much better solutions of how one could structure that sort of income so that it could be taxed at a much lower rate. But the advisory that they were with just never ever considered that. And I was asked that question by her. Well, if you can do this, why isn't my own accountant and the advisory that we're with, why haven't they suggested that solution? very simple. Very often it comes to licensing, experience, knowledge, and that global presence. But people just don't bother to ask or look for a second opinion.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Very simply and honestly, make that move to an international company sooner. Don't wait for so long. It was during COVID that I got headhunted by a few international companies and eventually decided to make that move to Holborn. But I should have done so much, much earlier in my career. The way I put it to my dad at the time when we were discussing the move, it's like chalk and cheese. You look at your local advisories, very often their idea of we're international, we're global, is we have a lot of offices inside South Africa and maybe one office or two in the UK and in Ireland, and that makes us global. Whereas with a company like Holborn, the solutions that I have access to, it's meant that my own client base has been able to move from just your regular, average, middle income to high net worth client to now actually being able to offer solutions and deal specifically in that high and ultra high net worth industry.
Why did you return to South Africa?
So I've lived in quite a number of countries across the globe. I love traveling, I love exploring. More so, I really enjoy old architecture and history. So I'm more of Europe, the UK, especially in my later years, Asia, China, South Korea. But one can only travel for so long. It's a great life. It's, exploring the world. It gives you a different mindset. But what happens, as with most people, kids come along. And it became very evident very quickly with my daughter, who was then about a year old, starting to walk, was walking from 9 months already. And you realize very quickly, growing up inside South Africa, it's a unique, different lifestyle. And honestly, when it comes to children, looking at all the countries that I've lived in, there is no better place. So literally one Christmas, she just turned 1, packed up our bags and said, right, let's go back to South Africa and live there instead. And haven't regretted that, not once, ever since coming back.